It's time we had a talk about your hair.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, in its original animated incarnation, is critically and culturally acclaimed for its storytelling and world building. If you're watching this video, you are probably well aware of that fact and have seen the show not just once, but probably multiple times. Originally airing between 2005 and 2008, the show's legacy lives on as fans, both old and new, continue to revisit the series, often coming away with a deeper understanding and appreciation of how truly vast and immersive the world of Avatar is. Online creators have left few stones unturned with breakdowns and analyses on all manner of topics, and they show no signs of stopping. There are so many aspects of this show that contribute to its status as a masterpiece, so many tiny details that make it clear just how much love and care and thought went into creating this beloved series, and I personally find something new to appreciate nearly every time I revisit the show. I typically do a rewatch every summer because I firmly believe that late summer is the best time to experience the show atmospherically, but I recently watched the Netflix live-action adaptation, and right after, I felt compelled to immediately turn on the original, as I think a lot of people did. Since the live-action had some seriously peculiar execution of its wigs and hairstyling, I found myself paying extra attention to the hair in the original. Now, I know that this is a topic that has existing discourse around it. Lots of people have pointed out and analyzed the symbolism of hair changes throughout the story, the cultural and historical inspiration behind the hairstyles, but I want to talk about it too. So let's look at how the series utilizes hair as a storytelling and world-building tool.
And you need to start wearing your hair up. In my dream, your hair got caught in a train and...
Aang, you really need to get a grip.
One of the strongest aspects of the series is in its visual storytelling. So much of the audience's understanding of the world and its characters comes from what we see rather than what we're told. For many people, myself included, this was one of the main problems with the Netflix adaptation. The characters are constantly speaking about what's happening, how they feel, instead of leaving room for the viewer to discern it. In the original series, not all questions are immediately answered, and not every detail is clearly explained. But when the series is viewed as a whole, the crafted world, its mythologies, customs, and philosophies can be comprehended. Seemingly inconsequential details, such as, say, a change in a character's hairstyle, might not have its importance explicitly spelled out for the audience, but we can understand their implied significance through the visual language the show has presented. I watch a lot of Avatar content and a lot of YouTube video essays. Some of my personal favorite video essays on Avatar are in regard to its visual storytelling and silent or subtle world building. Ones that point out aspects of in-universe culture or customs that we can understand based on moments or details that the show doesn't necessarily stop to clarify or contextualize. Or videos dissecting aesthetic choices like color or framing to interpret further meaning. And sure, maybe the conclusions are not always things that the creators intended to be read that way, but the fact that there's enough to be observed in the world that they built to do so is a testament to their abilities. There are countless examples throughout the series where deliberate imagery choices augment the main storylines and strengthen our grasp of the world. Before we dive into the role that hair and hairstyles play in that story and world, I think it's important to discuss two key points with regard to the show's visual language: the medium of animation, and the cultural influences behind the series.
Wait, why did you give me Momo's ears?
Those are your hair loopies!
Film and television are primarily visual experiences. Sound plays an important role, and there's a ton to be said for the ways in which moving images can stimulate the other senses, but the primary experience is a visual one. And in animation, when the images on screen are not captured from real sets and actors, there's an even more deliberate process to craft those final images. Now, it would be naive not to acknowledge the fact that there are some decisions made for practical or frivolous reasons. In the Art of the Animated Series book, there are mentions of character choices made for the sake of referencing friends and crew members with designs, or creatures that pay homage to other characters throughout film history, costumes that are adjusted for ease of animation or functionality of movement. And those decisions aren't in opposition to the story, but they're good reminders that there can be components of the world-building process that may not have been conceived for the sake of deep symbolic meaning. But this doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention or that we should discount choices that were made to convey deliberate meaning. It just means that sometimes the design came first and then the world was built around it. Many of us are used to watching animated shows where the characters never change clothes. So for a show like this to go above and beyond to change the characters' appearances so frequently, it's important to recognize the amount of thought that has to go into these processes and the potential subtext to be found in the final product. Taking Zuko's hair as an example, when we look at the entire series arc, we can draw a number of conclusions about his hair based on behaviors that we see throughout the Fire Nation. We shouldn't assume that because we later learn about the implied meaning behind his hairstyle, that all of that had been decided at the time of his design. The world-building process is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario in that way, and I do think it's important to keep it in mind. It's from the way the final choices, designs, and pieces fit together in a fully realized universe that we should draw conclusions.
Aang, this is the entire village. Entire village, Aang.
It's impossible to talk about the aesthetics and design choices in the world of Avatar without recognizing the various real-world influences. The four nations, each in their own right, take inspiration from specific cultures throughout history, occasionally combining elements into something original. While many of those influences are recognizable when watching, the direct inspirations are also something that have been clearly communicated by the team behind the show and explored further by online creators and fans over the years. Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, and the teams that worked with them to develop, design, and animate, lovingly crafted a world that is a beautiful amalgamation of Asian and Inuit cultures. I have personally found that watching this show and being a fan of the show has been a great gateway for learning more about these cultures, whether it's from the original creators, video essays, or that one very in-depth Tumblr blog that catalogs specific customs and items that appear in Avatar alongside their real-world counterparts. These inspirations and influences can be seen in many of the hairstyles from the series. YouTuber Lucky, in their video on hair symbolism in Avatar, points out a variety of the cultural inspirations on hair seen across the four nations, noting instances in which the symbolic meaning of hair associated with the referenced culture can serve as an applicable interpretation for its significance in the show, as well as the ways that we see characters' hair change throughout the series as a means of underscoring their emotional arcs. While important to recognize that there are very real customs, cultures, symbols, and ceremonies that have inspired the world of Avatar, it is, I think, also important to remember that they come together to create a unique fictional world. A world which operates according to its own system of rules, rites, and rituals. I don't suggest this in order to disregard the direct inspirations behind the show, or to downplay the importance of representation, but rather to showcase the series' ability to build a world and a story that can be fully comprehended without any additional knowledge of those cultural references. As an audience, yes, we can choose to interpret meaning according to the real-world counterparts they resemble, but we are given all the necessary tools to intuit meaning from the show itself. How certain aspects, such as hair, appear to us within the world and context of the show is, I would argue, ample enough to conclude meaning. I'll use perhaps the most iconic hair moment of the series to elaborate. The cutting of Zuko's ponytail and Iroh's top knot. There are a number of references and explanations outside of the original animated series that are used to assign meaning to this action, and there's a significant amount of overlap from different sources. This is indicative of the fact that, across our own cultures and histories, we see a multitude of symbols and symbolic acts with recurring meaning. In the anthropological essay Social Hair, author C.R. Hallpike notes, there is a large body of symbols and symbolic acts which is common to a large variety of cultures. And there are certain symbols and symbolic acts which are inherently appropriate in expressing particular concepts. And that is why these symbols are so commonly found and often have the same meaning in different cultures. When examining the symbolic nature of Zuko's ponytail removal, varied but congruous meaning can be sourced from different origins. One post from the Tumblr account atlaculture.tumblr.com points out that there are multiple valid cultural lenses through which to view this act. If you view it through a traditional Chinese lens, Zuko is renouncing his ties to his father. Confucians viewed hair as a precious gift from one's parents, and to cut one's hair was seen as an act of disloyalty. If you view it through a traditional Japanese lens, Zuko is renouncing his status in Fire Nation society and abandoning his title for the life of a peasant. In Japanese culture, a samurai seeking to join a monastery or the peasantry would cut off his top knot and undergo a dramatic decline in social status. If you view it through a traditional Thai lens, Zuko's haircutting is a rite of passage. He's leaving behind childhood and beginning his journey into adulthood. Each of these interpretations fit the narrative arc and hail from cultures that influence the aesthetics of the show. Yet, if you were to view the show with no prior knowledge of any such customs, a viewer is still able to experience this scene with similar emotional weight and symbolic understanding. Perhaps because of Hallpike's observation that there are certain symbols and symbolic acts which are inherently appropriate in expressing particular concepts, or perhaps because the show itself provides us with the necessary context. It's worth mentioning when discussing this particular scene that we are given a canonical explanation for this ritual in the novel The Rise of Kyoshi, which released in 2019, many years after the original series concluded. A passage from the novel relays the Fire Nation custom and provides added context for Zuko's hairstyle up until this scene. In the Fire Nation, hair was heavily linked with honor. Sometimes the losers of an important Agni Kai would shave parts of their head bald, laying patches of their scalp bare to symbolize an extra level of humility from their defeat. But the top knot was always sacred. It was never touched except in circumstances akin to death. The implication for the scene in question, of course, being that their fleeing from the Fire Nation and abandonment of their identities is a sort of death, and is significant enough to warrant this ritual act. I have mixed feelings on this explicit expansion of lore. On the one hand, I'm wildly appreciative of any continuation of the Avatar stories, and I happily accept additional world-building information. However, to me, this explanation feels more like a redundant statement than a revelation. Yes, it provides explicit answers to the questions, why did they cut off their hair in this moment, and why did Zuko look like that in Season 1? But it's my personal belief that the original series had already equipped us with the ability to answer those questions. For the sake of this video, I will also be avoiding any additional explanations for hairstyles given in Legend of Korra, though again, I do truly appreciate them. I just want to focus on the original 3 seasons. When examining the world of Avatar as it's shown in the original 3 seasons, we have the necessary context to interpret the relationships each of the 4 nations has with hair.
Got a bald head, some nice tattoos. You're going to fit in real well around here.
Hair, in the real world and thus often in media, is inextricably tied to identity. Across cultures, races, and ethnic backgrounds, hair is central to how we present ourselves, and sadly, often how we discriminate against others. Its presence, absence, or manipulation can be a political statement, a symbol of religious devotion, a tool for control, a canvas for self-expression. Deborah Pergament, in a piece for the Chicago Kent Law Review, writes, hairstyles and rituals surrounding hair care and adornment convey powerful messages about a person's beliefs, lifestyles, and commitments. Hair defines our identity and communicates messages about individuality or conscious adherence to the customs and standards of a group. How people act upon their hair instills it with value, which, in turn, adds resonance to the act of cutting or removing one's hair. Within the world of Avatar, each of the 4 nations has a distinct relationship to hair that we can interpret through the styling and treatment we're shown within the series.
What's wrong with ponytails, Ponytail?
This is a warrior's wolf tail.
Well, it certainly tells the other warriors that you're fun and perky.
Northern and southern water tribes showcase a variety of hairstyles and use adornments like beads and cuffs. The signature updo, known as the warrior's wolftail, is worn by many water tribe men and boys, and can vary in style and adornment, while some young boys let their hair flow free. In the southern water tribe, the wolftail is commonly worn as a single ponytail tuft at the crown. In the northern water tribe, however, it appears more common for the men to wear theirs in a braid at the crown, a more elaborate style for a more cosmopolitan population. Sokka chooses to initially shave the sides of his head so that the wolftail is more defined, a visual signal of his desperation to prove himself as a warrior. But for many men, the remaining hair can vary in length and adornment, seemingly based on personal preference. The women wear a plethora of styles throughout the north and south. Though we see recurring elements like braids and hair loopies, their styles are homogeneous without being indistinguishable, with enough variety to infer that there's no suppression of individuality within their communities. Princess Yue's hair is one of the most intricate water tribe styles we see, likely due to her highborn status. We can also assume the additional symbolic value placed on her hair through the backstory she shares. When the moon spirit gave her life, her hair turned white. This could imply that, in the years after, her hair was treated with particular reverence for the spiritual qualities it possessed, explaining why it is so meticulously prepared and prominently positioned. The changes we see in Katara's hair throughout the series drive home the significance of her connection to the way her hair is styled. That is, styled in a way that connects her to her tribe. Katara's hair loopies are referenced as being linked to her identity.
I feel like I've lost part of my identity. Imagine if you lost your arrow, or if Katara lost her hair loopies.
And we see, in viewing other Water Tribe members, that the hair loopies are a shared traditional style. Gran styles her hair in this exact way. When the gang is forced to don their Fire Nation disguises in Season 3, Katara changes her hair in order to remain inconspicuous. The style is maintained except in moments where it's important for Katara to feel grounded in her Water Tribe identity. During the Day of Black Sun and the Southern Raiders, the hair loopies return, linking her once again in physicality to her culture and her truest self. In these moments, wearing her Water Tribe style is done in defiance of the Fire Nation. Alternatively, when we see Katara stand her ground against Pakku for her right to use waterbending as a warrior despite being a woman, her hair comes undone in battle. This symbolic unraveling of a traditional hairstyle punctuates the scene, wherein Katara herself is opposing the established cultural norms. Hairstyling has value in the Water Tribes as it is a way to connect with cultural identity unique to their people. They are small nations, comparatively, and face extinction at the hands of the Fire Nation, which adds a layer of urgency to the protection of their traditions. Katara, through her narrative arc and her hairstyles, strives to honor and uphold her roots, but not blindly devote herself to outdated beliefs.
He wasn't bald, he had a shaved head. Shaved. That's a hairdo.
The Air Nomads forego their hair, for one, in order to better display their airbending tattoos, a symbol of their airbender identity. We could choose to interpret this as a relinquishing of personal identity in favor of symbolically uniting as a people with a collective identity, or as a way of detaching oneself from earthly preoccupations to achieve a more spiritual existence, which the Air Nomads are known for. In this way, it may be a recognition of the idea that hair might be used to control or punish, to flaunt wealth and status, and therefore it is a rejection of those concepts. Regardless, the hairstyle of a shaved head, or just a shaved forehead in the case of the Air Nomad women, visibly unites them. Though we do occasionally see that the Air Nomad men can sport varied facial hairstyles, implying that, while their baldness presents a unified identity, self-expression is still encouraged. When Aang is first forced to hide by growing out his hair and sporting the headband, he resents it.
I'm not going out if I can't wear my arrow proudly.
Aang, come on, be practical.
This act of forced hairstyling means something much deeper to Aang because it disconnects him from his identity and his customs as an air nomad. It is a suppression of his selfhood. Despite understanding that this is the practical choice for this moment in the story, we empathize with Aang's frustration because of the deep understanding we have of how his arrows, and thus his chosen style of a shaved head, are bound to his identity and are something he takes pride in. The implications of his hair, in this instance, go far beyond the hair itself. The moment we first see Aang with hair is the point at which Aang feels most he has failed. He's questioning his abilities, his destiny, and his identity. And visually, he is changed from the appearance that we're familiar with. By the time we reach the episode Nightmares and Daydreams, his anxieties about his abilities and his role as the Avatar are at an all-time high, and his hair is the longest we've seen.
You don't get it, do you? My form is bad, I'm sloppy, and I still don't know any firebending.
It's not until the Day of Black Sun, where we see him return to his baldness, that we see him confidently return to his role as the Avatar.
And her hair seems so manageable.
The Earth Kingdom, the largest landmass with the most diverse population, exhibits the widest variety of styles in the world of Avatar. We see many variations on styles found in the other nations, like top knots and braids. We see many Earth Kingdom officials and citizens wear hats for seemingly functional or fashionable purposes, and we see those hats and headgear differ across Earth Kingdom locales. But what is most evident in Earth Kingdom hairstyling is the freedom to choose, with many opting just to leave their hair unstyled. The variety of styles can be a result of converging points. First, the Earth Kingdom is home to a large number of refugees and colonials, displacing people from their native cultures and blurring the lines of nation-specific hairstyles. Next, due to the size of the Earth Kingdom, there are major cultural and class divides. Hairstyles in the countryside vastly differ from those of wealthy city dwellers and high-ranking officials, who are able to devote more time to the maintenance and preparation of their hair. Hair in the Earth Kingdom appears to be more closely linked to class than anything else. Styling and adornment are often in pursuit of displaying social status. While there is some serious brainwashing and bullying happening within the walls of Ba Sing Se, on the whole, its citizens are allowed to express themselves. When Zuko goes on his date with Jin in the Tales of Ba Sing Se, we see that they both change their hair for the occasion, showcasing that they can change up the hair without adhering to anything particular, and without the need for ceremony. Hair can simply be styled as the wearer desires. It need not be an act of resistance or a reflection of ideals. This is in direct opposition to the Fire Nation.
Hotman, 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 Hotman.
Fire Nation outlook on hair is one that heavily intertwines it with identity and worthiness, or honor, if you will. Fire Nation hair overwhelmingly appears in the traditional top knot, or a variation of the top knot style. It's rare that we see Fire Nation characters without their top knot, though there are instances when characters are in repose, or when their noble birth, ranking, or character design allows them an alternative. While we see occasional variations on the top knot, what is abundantly clear is its use as a nationalist symbol and its means of curbing individuality throughout the Fire Nation and its territories.
It's a form of self-expression that no one can ever take away from you. But we don't do that here.
Widespread use of the top knot strips the citizens of their ability to express themselves outside of their identities as members of the Fire Nation. We see throughout the show that Fire Nation children are indoctrinated from a young age to believe in Fire Nation supremacy. They are fed propaganda and forced to conform to warped ideals.
Oh
no! We see in the episode The Headband that they are highly controlled and kept in line, barred from self-expression.
Young people must have rigid discipline and order.
But what about expressing yourself?
Where there is uniformity, those who act in opposition are easier to recognize. Dictation of how the hair need be worn can be viewed as a form of subjugation and control. The nationalist association with the hairstyle creates a crucial visual link between top knot and Fire Nation pride. As a viewer, we can comprehend that to sever the connection with the top knot is to sever the connection with the Fire Nation. Of course, we see Zuko and Iroh famously slice theirs off at the start of Season 2, leaving their old lives behind, and obviously also needing to disguise themselves. There are two other impactful moments we see wherein the top knot is let down in an abandonment of the Fire Nation. The first is Zhong Zhong. We see his wanted poster, in which his hair is up in the top knot, but when we finally meet him, his hair is loose. He has rejected his Fire Nation identity and the symbols that signify it. Also, yes, again, he does need to be in disguise, but that is not the point. We don't know for sure whether he has cut the hair itself or simply restyled it, but either way, he's casting off the recognizable Fire Nation aspects. The second moment I want to highlight is the first instance in which we see Fire Lord Ozai without his top knot. He wears his top knot up until the moment at which he no longer identifies merely as the Fire Lord. He casts off that title in favor of the world-dominating moniker of the Phoenix King. He no longer requires a symbol of the Fire Nation, as it is in this moment that the Fire Nation, and what it has come to represent, crosses over into complete distortion.
Fire Lord Ozai is no more. Just as the world will be reborn in fire, I shall be reborn as the supreme ruler of the world.
This is made all the more pronounced by the implied intense care that's taken to treat Fire Nation hair, at least among the royal family. In the scene I previously mentioned, where Zuko gets his hair restyled for his date, he mentions how long it took Uncle Iroh to style it.
It took my uncle 10 minutes to do my hair.
Implying that he took great care in its preparation. We see Azula meticulously caring for her hair, and in a handful of scenes we're able to marvel at its length, far longer than it appears when styled into the top knot.
If you've come for a royal hair combing, I'm afraid you'll have to wait.
Length of hair is noticeable among the Fire Nation, particularly among the elites. Obviously, long hair can be found across the other nations as well, but we take more notice of it in the Fire Nation given how omnipresent the tucked-up top knots are. Ozai's hair is fit for a L'Oreal ad. The length and the implied care that goes into maintaining such long flowing locks in turn suggests that to cut the hair is reserved for extraordinary circumstances. Which brings us back to Zuko.
Who's Zuko?
Oh, just some angry freak with a ponytail.
When we meet Prince Zuko, he's donning his iconic yet questionable shaved head long ponytail combo. As mentioned, we learn in Rise of Kyoshi that this particular style is a result of a notable Agni Kai loss. But we can infer something similar from the events we see in the show, albeit not in their chronological order. When we see Zuko in the flashback of the fateful Agni Kai with his father, he is a child with his childhood hairstyle, a high ponytail at the crown in place of a topknot. In the immediate aftermath, once Zuko has departed the Fire Nation, but when his wound is still fresh, we can see that he's already changed his hair, shaving off all but the ponytail. Given the order of events, we concur that the change in style was a direct result of the Agni Kai loss and banishment. Whether done as a form of punishment itself or out of his own shame and humiliation, it's clear that the catalyst for this change was the loss, disownment, and all of the complicated inner feelings tangled up in those events. Zuko forsakes his hair, his personal identity, but the ponytail remains, the portion of hair most associated with Fire Nation identity. He ceremoniously marks himself through the removal, yet maintains his physical and symbolic link as a representative of the Fire Nation, emphasizing his singular devotion to regaining his honor and returning home. He is also the only character, except for this guy, and these guys, who we see with this style, further isolating him and implying that it's not a common occurrence to sport this look. It's not until later, when he and Iroh become fugitives of the Fire Nation and give up their search for the Avatar, foregoing the chance to regain honor in the eyes of the Fire Lord, that he removes the ponytail completely, cementing his commitment to a new life, a new identity, and an opportunity for growth, at least for now. Over the remaining episodes, we see Zuko's inner transformation mirrored by the physical growth of his hair. He's no longer bound by a misaligned idea of destiny and self-worth, and he can discover who he truly wants to be. The visual growth that we see happen is the perfect representation of his inner journey. Of course, this is disrupted by a temporary lapse in judgment and a return to the Fire Nation. When back home, with his falsified renewal of honor, he dons the traditional topknot. But not at all times. In his moments of truth and revelation, his hair remains down, unbound by the corrupt ideals of his homeland. He no longer fits in where he desperately tried to belong, and neither does his hair. It is in this stage of the story where Zuko begins to accept that it is his destiny to help the Avatar defeat his father and restore balance.
What happened generations ago can be resolved now by you.
To return the Fire Nation to a place of honor. In this way, he need not sever his topknot, but simply let his hair down. He does not reject the Fire Nation aspects of himself, but refuses to be defined by the corrupt symbols and ideals that represent it. It's not the individual who is dishonored, but the collective. He casts off the symbols of oppression rather than ritualistically punishing himself again. In relinquishing the Fire Nation's control of his hairstyle, he's reclaiming control over his own life. By the time Zuko fashions himself a topknot again, it is as the Fire Lord, in a new era of the Fire Nation, set on restoring balance and honor to the world and to their sullied identity. It is a reclamation of what the symbol has come to represent. Now, we can't conclude a discussion of hair, identity, and the Fire Nation without dissecting the iconic Azula haircutting scene.
All right, hair, it's time to face your doom.
We've established that the Fire Nation royal family places immense value on the hair itself, and we see Azula taking scrupulous care to keep her hair perfectly maintained and groomed. When we're first introduced to Azula, we see her taking care to smooth her hair. Later, her frustration when even a single strand falls out of line is striking.
One hair out of place.
Almost isn't good enough.
In our first moments of knowing her character, we see that her self-image is tied in some part to her hair. We see that she strives for precision and composure in her appearance as well as her firebending. It's worth noting that this occurs in the same episode in which we see Zuko and Iroh sever their own hair and their ties to the Fire Nation. As we're taught that Azula values her hair and is confident in her role, we simultaneously see Zuko and Iroh reverently sacrifice their own hair and step into the unknown. When Azula comes close to being bested in battles, her hair is often caught in the crossfires. Through this visual language, we impart significance upon Azula's hair and conclude its connection to her identity as a perfectionist. When she falters, so does her hair. It is in her lowest moments that we see this manifest fully. In a deep state of paranoia, Azula attempts to style her own topknot. The result is distressing, But the scene takes it one step further when Azula wields a pair of scissors and makes a haphazard cut. She does this unceremoniously, and we view the cut to be indicative of a major character shift. Azula, in her right mind, would never dream of cutting her hair in such a way, if at all, given its established importance to her and to her culture. To see her hair a mess is to understand that she is a mess, far gone from the composed, cunning mastermind we've seen until now. But I return again to the failed topknot. The symbol of Fire Nation pride and control is distorted. The hairstyle, a national symbol, no longer looks right. The identity of the Fire Nation has been so long corrupted by Azula and her forefathers that the style and what it has come to represent is a bastardization. She is unable to properly affix this symbol of her nation because she is unworthy of her role in the nation's warped identity. Her resulting style is not an intentional one. She doesn't cut her hair in accordance with ritual, but out of her own misguided frustration. And that fact alone, given what we've exhibited thus far, adds to the depth of our recognition that she is not in her right mind. Of course, we could come to more conclusions and comparisons if we factor in specific cultural interpretations and inspirations. But the point I've tried to maintain with this analysis is that they're not essential for an understanding of the role hair plays in the world of Avatar. We learn and interpret through what we see and what we're told explicitly within the show's universe. Through its expert storytelling and use of powerful but subtle techniques for context clues, Avatar: The Last Airbender can be read as a standalone work. The world that they've built speaks for itself, and seemingly tiny details can play a major role in how we perceive this universe and its characters. What's your favorite hairstyle from the world of Avatar? If you liked this video, stay tuned for more. I hope to start making regularly scheduled content, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. And if you didn't like this video, stay tuned for more. Maybe the next one will be different.